Harry Heater. A life full of change. What does change mean to you, especially in a career?
Well, I'll tell you, it means a little bit of courage. It means it means knowing that change is inevitable in life, and sometimes I don't know about sometimes, but I think a lot of times people are afraid of change. Well, what if you actually were seeking change? Would it become less scary, right? Even in a small way. Maybe you change how you drive to work, and maybe you change uh, the food you eat. Well, this is me. I never eat this food. Well, maybe you start eating this food, right? Um, uh, and so for me, change has never been difficult in careers.
Hmm.
It's always been very easy because where I wanted to go was clear. What I wanted to do, I could feel it. And I wasn't worried about the financial consequences because
Really?
that will take care of yourself. That'll take care of itself.
Wow. Okay, so how did you come up with that mindset? Of course, there are people who don't have that relationship with money that it just will come to them whatever they do. So, can you explain that a little bit? What you mean by that?
No, absolutely. Part of it I think is innate. I think partly you're born with a certain sense of freedom. I think awareness of the freedom. Let me clarify that.
Hmm.
We're all born with a sense, in my opinion, a sense of expansion. What are we here to do in life? We're here to grow. We're here to create. We're here to expand. Right. Well, are you aware of it? Is the first question. Are you aware that there's something in you that wants more? And that doesn't mean you're unhappy where you are. Maybe you are, but maybe you like where you are, but you just want to expand. You want more. And I've never been afraid to do that. The first thing I can think of is actually when I was probably around 20 years old and I quit smoking. It was cool to smoke cigarettes, right? So around 15 years old, I started smoking cigarettes, and after a while, it was just hideous. Couldn't. There's nothing good about it. So I said, "That's it. I'm going to quit." And and it took me 3 days. That's it. And the
3 days.
secret to
Sorry,
that,
sorry, 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 sorry. You kept smoking for 5 years, and in three
5
days, you
years,
just
3 days, I was
thread
done.
it overboard.
It was done. So what I did was, I remember chewing a plastic straw for a day or two, and then I remember allowing myself to cheat, but I wanted to make it hurt. So I would go in and I'd buy a pack of cigarettes if I wanted one, and I was getting weak. Day 4, 5, 6. Uh, I'd go in and buy a pack of cigarettes. I'd pull one out before I even put it in my mouth or lit it. I'd take the other 19 and I'd crush them and I'd throw them in the trash. And then I'd smoke that one cigarette, one or two puffs, I'd throw it away. And and I allowed myself some. I guess looking back on it, I didn't think of it like this at the time. But now that we're talking about it, I think I just sort of forgave myself. Like I allowed myself some grace, some forgiveness to not have to be perfect in in what I was doing. As long as like the end goal, which was to quit smoking, was achieved. If there's a few bumps in the road, so what? There always are.
Hmm.
Looking back on it now, I mean, 40 years later, that's probably what I was practicing, with a little self forgiveness and letting letting myself know it's all right if it's not perfect.
That is so beautiful because when people try to discipline themselves, like for instance with eating disorders, you're trying to diet, you're trying to get your body in shape, and then there is always this craving for sugar. And when you have something at home still, the opportunity is there, and most people they're
Guilty.
just caving in and they get it. And most people, I'm as well, just beating myself up about it, getting again, giving up to this, yeah, to this craving and everything. So you just graced yourself, you forgave yourself. Was it that easy like it sounds right now?
Looking back on it, I mean, for that for that instance, right? Yeah, it really was. And sometimes it's just, the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same, sort of a cliche that we have. Um, and when the pain of change is less, you go ahead and you make that change because it just hurts too much to stay where you are. And for me at the time when I was quitting, smoking cigarettes, there was so much that was not good about it. I didn't feel good. My breathing wasn't good. My nose was congested. I couldn't taste my food. My clothes stunk. My parents didn't like it. I mean, there was just so many reasons not to not to do it. And it was easy. Now changing careers, well, a little bit different, but I always seem to follow an instinct when I made those changes,
Mhm.
and it just seemed clear. I've had 3 very distinct careers in my life, and I'm, um, in process of launching the 4th, and so I never really worried about it. Maybe it's kinda like that kid that goes skiing down the ski hill, 1,000 miles an hour because they don't know they could hit a tree. You know? There's sort of this blissful ignorance maybe, around what is, but I just always knew that it just made sense to do what made me happy, as long as I'm not, intentionally hurting anybody, and I just followed that.
You said earlier something that just stuck to my mind, that you always were a person that want to change when you're not feeling good about yourself right now, but you also can want change when you're feeling good, when you're somewhere. And I happen to find myself over and over again in the situation that something goes very, very good, and then I want something else completely out of the blue. For instance, playing soccer or football for many, many years, and then just craving to start basketball out of the blue without anything bad happening in football or anything like that.
Sure.
Why is it that we humans actually are drawn in by change, or we are always fascinated about this idea that there could be more than there already is, even when everything is good?
Well, I think part of it, like I had mentioned, earlier, we're born with it, and I don't wanna go off on too crazy of a tangent here, but, it sort of depends on how you look about life in general and how you feel about life, right? I happen to think, and what resonates with me is the idea that we're energetic beings. We're temporarily living a physical life on the planet Earth, but ultimately we're energetic beings. We're part of the source energy, whatever created this universe, right? So I think inherently, innately, if we're made of stardust and moon dust, then yeah, we have that knowledge, quote unquote knowledge somewhere in memory here, um, that we're part of something grander, and we're striving for that, even if a lot of people don't know it. Because let's face it, the powers that be like to keep people distracted, right? And to keep your eye off the big prize, right? Which
Mhm.
is independence and freedom and free thought and self actualization and self creation, right? Because it's dangerous. It's threatening to the people in power. So they want to limit that. So it's hard for people to, I think, to break out of that and get in touch with that part of them that wants more, even in the absence of a problem. Because I just think we innately know that there's more out there. I mean, look at space exploration, for example, right? I'm fascinated with it. I built my own telescope when I was 21, and I still have it and works perfectly well today. But I did that out of a longing to know what's out there. Why is it out there? And why is it all together? Why is there a universe to begin with? And I think quietly, a lot of people will ask themselves, you know, bigger questions like that. And I think if people allow themselves, they can actually connect with the feeling inside that draws them to the more, even in the absence of a problem of where they are. In fact, I think that's a healthier place to be, is a place of gratitude. where you recognize that you're whole and complete right now. You've got everything. You want to expand, you want more. That's great, right? A lot of great people do. Um, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily lacking anything now. Does that make
This
sense?
this makes sense, but I can't help myself but think about people that don't have the availability for even thinking about change right now. So life happens to many, many people out there, and they are in a hard situation. For instance, right now, they're struggling to pay the bills, they're struggling with life, struggling to keep their family together. How can a person in these moments even think about change? Is it even a good moment to think about change, or is there a phase or situation in life where you should try to fix everything that's going on right now and then afterwards think about change? What is your stance on that?
Yeah, I think it's a highly personal thing. I think my wife has this saying, right now it's like this. Eh, Tony Robbins likes to say, your problems aren't permanent, they're not pervasive, and they're not permanent. I'm sorry, they're not personal. So he calls it the three P's, annihilate the three P's. So the realizing that, where we are right now, and it might be a struggle to pay the bills and to bring everything together. And there could be family concerns that you have to address. So I don't think there's anything wrong with, with telling yourself, and what works for me is to say, look, right now it's like this. Based on what I've created in my life and how I've responded to different situations in my life, this is my reality. I've
Mhm,
created it. There are things in it that I'm now dealing with. I can do that and I can still have my eye on the future, not dwell on the present, not dwell on the past, but actually take time. And everyone can find 5 minutes to close their eyes and just vision. Think about what the next step is. Think about and feel, more importantly, feel what it's like to be in that new place that's just even a little bit better than where you are without feeling bad for where you are. Does that make sense?
that does make sense, but I think many people think of what you just described as dreaming, having a dream of what your life could be. And what I was talking about is that many people don't even have the luxury to dream right now in their lives because something bad is happening. And if there
Sure.
are life situations where change isn't an option, or is change really always an option? Maybe that is the better question.
I think change is always an option, but again, I think it's very personal.
Okay.
What somebody values, right? Because it all comes down to what we value. People have difficult situations in their life,
Hmm.
certainly, and but we all have choices. The best thing to do is to own it and say this is what I'm doing and this is why. And if you have it, and I think, by the way, dreaming is fantastic. It doesn't mean it's a fantasy, it's a goal, right? It's a vision of the future. And, to delude yourself, like, I'm not going to have a dream of playing in the NBA, right? That's just not going to happen. So it has to be something that resonates with you and actually you feel good about and keeps you looking toward the future. And I think it's an important thing to have. Not feeling bad about not being there yet, honoring where you are now, taking care of difficult circumstances, whether it's a family situation, a money situation, a health concern, something like that. Those are really, really vitally important things to people. And
Hmm.
and I think focusing on that and not trying to overburden or complicate your life with trying to make a change is probably a wise thing to do, right? But I think it really does come down to what you value, where you want to spend your time and your energies in order to do it. But I do think it's also important to always keep in mind, okay, where would I like to be? Where would I like to be? Not feeling bad because you're not there yet, but when this clears up, what's my next step? What's the one thing I can do? The next best thing to do in order to move my life forward? if that's what you want to do.
Mhm. What would you tell a person that doesn't like where they are right now in life and is thinking about change?
Well, a great thing to do is to look for the positive in where you are. Even though you don't like it, what what aspect of it don't you like? For example, let's say someone doesn't like their job. Well, maybe they work for a very stable company who pays on time and they don't have to worry about a paycheck uh, not being there. Well, it might be a small thing, but kind of it's a big thing, right? Because it is allowing you to pay your expenses right now. And so having even starting with a little bit of gratitude for where you are is a good thing because it boosts your energy and it helps attract what you want in the future. And if you want change, just make sure it feels right and then do it. Just change. Make the change. I did that when I changed from being a chef to being a chiropractor. It was just that simple. I had done some research around different professions because I knew I almost loved being a chef. A lot of bonuses to it. You eat great food. It doesn't cost you anything, really. Great camaraderie in a kitchen. A lot of fun working in that environment. But I felt like I was made for more.
Mhm.
I really did. I felt like I was sort of underperforming. And so through some self-searching and so forth, I found chiropractic and I went and I talked to my chiropractor and he gave me some good advice and it just made sense to do it. So I just went in and, you know, talked to my boss and said, "Well, I'm changing careers. I've got whatever it is, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then I have to leave because I have to go back to school."
Yeah, and that is that crazy, crazy thing that you changed your career multiple times at various different stations in life. How did you come up with this courage every single time? Was it just always feeling that bad in your life, or did you always just feel this big, big magnet pull to this new thing?
It's more the second thing. It was more of a pull toward it was more going towards something than running away from something.
Mhm,
I was working in the high tech industry in the U.S. in the 1980s, and that's when it was really taking off. So, the pay was still very good, the hours were very good, the benefits working for a big tech company were fantastic, but I didn't really it didn't interest me. I had great friends there. It was easy, but I was uninspired. And
mhm.
so I love to cook. My family loves to cook. So when I was driving home from work one day, I saw a sign on the side of the road that said an adventure and an experience in food. I was like, well, that's cool. I would like an adventure and an experience in food. So I went in, it was a small market and in a restaurant together in one building, talked to the owners. They were looking to hire someone to cook. And I said, well, shoot, I know how to cook. I'm good at that. My family taught me. So let's do this. And so that's what I did. I went in and, it's not the easiest thing to do to take a, you know, 30, 40, 50% pay cut. But I also realized that I was young at the time. I was in my mid 20s, plenty of time to recover and make more money. So
Mhm.
it didn't bother me. So that's what I did. I walked in, I gave my notice, and I went from working with computers to working in a restaurant and eventually went to culinary school and became a chef and worked in hotels and golf resorts and things like that for close to 20 years.
Wow. So we did just talk about all the good things that change can do for someone. Is on the opposite side a life without change a bad life? Is a life without change crippling to a person?
Well, I don't know that there is such a thing as a life without change. I think the only thing that's constant is change. one of the Buddha, I think it's a Buddhist saying, uh, uh, is that which is real is that which does not change. Which is to say, l- life in general is an illusion.
Yeah,
And there are
that would
certain
have been
right, and there are
my
certain
next
fundamental
question.
things that yeah, there are certain fundamental things that don't change, right? But very few. Um, yeah, I don't know that there is a life without change. Honestly, I would say that there's a life where someone resists change,
Mhm.
where someone can minimize change, right? Um, but it's also very personal. Everyone's journey is their own, and that's one of the things that I don't think we're taught enough of. You know, we're taught to go see experts for different things, which is great. You know, I'm all for getting advice from people who have been there and done that. But also, I think there's a certain level of expertise that we have that we're not taught to honor and respect. Right? We can trust our own intuition. We can trust our own feeling on something. Just because everybody thinks we're crazy for doing, you know, X doesn't mean it's wrong. I mean, look at all these great inventions, right? Whether it's a light bulb or an airplane and, you know, automobile. I mean, all these people that were inventing things were nuts. You know, the guy that discovered that hand washing was a good idea, that there were these things called germs, right? He found it out because he was looking at doctors who were going from the maternity ward delivering babies, and then they would go to the other side of the lab where they were working on cadavers and doing autopsies. And they would go back and forth, but I mean, they might wipe their hands, but they never sanitized or cleaned anything. And just through observations, he noticed that women who were in that environment were dying in childbirth a lot more than women who were giving birth outside of this doctor environment. So his theory was there's got to be something invisible that doctors are carrying with them from the autopsy room into the maternity ward. He ended up in an insane asylum because they thought he was absolutely ludicrous. Now we take for granted that germs exist and that they're harmful if they're not, you know, properly, you know, taken care of. So, you know, he trusted his own viewpoint. He trusted his own experience. He trusted how he felt and what he knew. And I think that's missing in a lot of people. And I don't blame them, right? Because we're not encouraged to do that,
Yeah.
right? We're not encouraged to do that at all in life. And it's a shame.
So the change that you yourself are doing is easy when yourself is in control. So when I want to change something, it is easier for me to change that thing than to change the other person to do something that I would like or to guide them in a direction. Why is change that more difficult when it comes to others from the personal view of point of view?
Could you repeat the question, please?
So
Sorry.
yeah, no problem. So everybody goes around change now. You have your changes in your life, and it's always easy to adapt to change when it's happening to yourself. But of course, when
Well, I
you
don't
get
know
it
about
to
that.
yeah,
I don't
not
think I'd agree
always
with
easy, but you are in control at least, and you have some sense of where you
that.
need to go or what maybe is happening. But when you are in a
Yeah,
relationship,
some
for
control.
for instance,
Yes.
yeah, when you're in a relationship, for instance, sometimes the other person is changing without you even noticing, and then you find yourself in a completely different relationship. So why is change always another deal when it comes to other persons from besides their own?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I would it's kind of a hard one to answer. Actually, I think there's a lot of respect that people have for each other, and if someone makes a change, they're going to be aware of how that might affect the other person, and if it affects that other person in a negative way, you know, I think that's a problem for you know for the person who's encouraging the change, because fundamentally I think anybody wants to hurt anybody else.
Hmm. Okay. The thing I want to go out on is because you are married since 2004. and of course a lot of change has
Mm.
happened in this time frame as well. Was this change easier in the relationship to go through, or was change on your own when you were single, when you're solely in control, easier to deal with?
I suppose it would depend on where the change is. I think if you find someone who, like I did, who understands that change is part of life, and then it can be just as easy. Certainly, when you're married or in any sort of a committed relationship, there's a concern for the other person. So
Hmm.
you're less likely to just go off and do something that you want to do without regard for them. Um, but that's a choice that people make.
Yeah, certainly. But we always talked about this career change and everything, and now you are married. You're 40 years old. You have two kids. The buy-in bar for a career change is certainly higher now, in my
Yes.
opinion, than when you're just on your own 40 and did 3 hour career changes. So how did you pull it off and balance it with your family?
Well, my wife was changing at the same time, so that helped.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
and we don't have children, so we didn't have to worry about that. And if we did have children, now I have to theorize this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't talk from experience on this particular point, but I think it's a great lesson for the kids to know that change is okay and to embrace it because it's going to be there. There is more outside of us that we cannot control than we can control. Right? We control a very small part. We control 100% of what's inside of us, right? How we
Mm-hmm.
feel, how we react, how we respond to any situation. Outside of us is never going to work 100%, right? The way we want it, maybe 5%. So I think it's a great lesson for children to know, look, we're making a change. This is why we're doing it. And I'm a big fan of talking to kids like they're adults, right? Treating them with respect, treating them as smart individuals who can, within reason, of course, who can really understand more than we give them credit for some of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And let them know, these are the decisions we're making. This is why we're doing it. It's going to be great for this reason. I know you're going to be upset because you're going to miss your friends because we're moving into a different city or whatever. Um, but this is what life is like, and it's done with love. It's done with hope. It's done with with doing due diligence, right? It's not just some sort of chaotic knee jerk emotional reaction. It's actually something that's well thought out. And if it makes sense to do it, everybody being on board and say, yeah, we're going to make this change. And it can be really hard for people. I mean, it's hard for me. I've lived in 5 different cities. I've had 20 different addresses, um, in my life, which, is great because I get to see a lot of places, but by the same token, if you don't put down the roots for a long time, then you don't have as many friends. So,
Yeah.
I have friends that are in other cities, right, that I still consider good friends, as well as the city that I'm in, but it's different when I look at, say, I have a friend here who's never left the city. He's been here 60 years. He has maybe hundreds of friends, right? A huge social network. So, there are pros and cons to any decision we make, and as long as we go in with our eyes open, I think that's a smart thing to do. And hey, let's face it, for the most part, if you make a change in life and you don't like it, you can almost always go back.
Yeah. Like Mark Zuckerberg says, when there is always a door when doing something new, and as long as it is a door that you can go back through, we should take the risk and go through the door. So
Yeah, not bad advice.
I think it's surprisingly interesting. After 40 talks on Life Decoded, every single talk I did came down to the comfort zone. And today, a lot of us learned that it is even better, and everybody is born with a drive to leave this comfort zone and to drive for change. Thank you so much, Harry Heater. Where can people go to get to know you a bit better or to keep up with your many career changes?
Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. As I mentioned briefly, I'm on social media, so LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I'm launching an education company. It's specifically for people who are interested in looking at health options outside of the traditional Western medical scenario, if that hasn't worked for them. Newpatientclass.com. Newpatientclass.com is the website. I serve both family wellness chiropractors and the individual who's a health seeker looking for maybe an option to clear up a health issue that hasn't responded yet or well enough through traditional means.
Well, thank you so much for your work and the time. Have a great day.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Mo.